They thought silence drove humans mad until they saw us drift peacefully into it. The signal didn't announce itself. There was no pulse, no static burst, no alien tone. It was the absence of everything, a sudden void in the constant whisper of the cosmos. Deep space receivers near Neptune caught it first, a sphere 4 million kilometers wide where every frequency simply vanished. Instruments recorded nothing, yet the silence itself had weight, a gravity of its own. Dr. Myra Solon leaned over the console, listening to the data that wasn't there. "It's not an error," she murmured. "It's intentional." The technicians exchanged nervous glances. In all their years, nothing in space had ever been that perfectly quiet. Within a week the object moved, gliding toward the edge of the solar system like a great lung exhaling emptiness. Then came a message, a map drawn not in light but in negative energy, leading to a region devoid of stars. Humanity argued, prayed, and panicked. Scientists named it the silent domain. Militaries called it a threat. Mira called it an invitation. 5 years later, the ship Eosne launched. 6 astronauts trained to endure isolation were chosen for the first approach. Commander Nathan Erie, famed for meditating for hours in soundproof chambers, led them. He said he wanted to meet the quiet halfway. When Eosne crossed the boundary, every sound died. The hum of machinery, the pulse of ventilators, even the crackle of radio vanished. They could see each other's mouths move, but no vibration reached the ear. Sensors flatlined. From Earth Mission Control watched their video feed continue in perfect silence. Instead of panic, the crew seemed tranquil. Erie's expression softened. He raised one hand to the camera and pressed a finger to where his lips would be, not warning, but reverence. Then the transmission ended. The sphere collapsed into nothingness. No debris, no radiation, just a spreading hush that seemed to soak into the universe itself. Mira sat alone in the darkened control room long after everyone had gone, feeling that hush pressing at her thoughts. That night she dreamed of floating weightless, of a hand reaching out through the void. "It's beautiful here," said Irie's voice inside the dream. "You were wrong. Silence isn't empty." The world did not forget the EOS-9 crew, but after the broadcast went dark, Earth's leaders chose to bury the mission beneath classified files and sterile memorials. Only Mira refused to let it die. She spent years reanalyzing the data, combing through hours of nothing. The more she listened, the more she became convinced that there was something hidden within that silence, patterns too deliberate to be random. In spectrograms she noticed faint fluctuations spaced like breaths. The silence, she thought, was alive. Her colleagues dismissed it as grief. But grief doesn't hum in frequencies mathematics can predict. At night, the dreams returned. She floated weightless above an invisible surface. The universe spread beneath her like a sea of ink. Around her, fragments of light pulsed like dying stars. Then came Marie's voice again, calm, steady, far too clear to be imagination. "We're still here, Myra. Don't fear the stillness. Listen deeper." The next morning, she requested permission to relaunch a probe. The Global Space Authority refused. Funding had evaporated. Public fear was still raw. No one wanted to disturb whatever slept out there, so she built her own. She called it Eoston, a probe the size of a suitcase, cobbled together in secret from stolen parts and private donations. She didn't tell anyone that the mission wasn't unmanned. She didn't tell anyone she'd already signed her name into the pilot roster. 3 months later, under a false name and a false mission code, Eoston launched from a forgotten Arctic pad. It was a one-seat vessel wrapped in stealth plating, programmed to glide silently along the path Eoston had taken. As the engines faded and the stars sharpened, Mira felt the first hint of that hush creeping into her helmet. The vibration of the ship's systems dimmed until her own heartbeat sounded like thunder. "Telemetry stable," she whispered, then realized she could no longer hear her own voice. Silence unfolded like a curtain. Every molecule of air, every photon, seemed to slow. The black ahead deepened into something denser, almost physical. The stars around her flickered and then vanished one by one, swallowed by a smooth, endless dark. And then she saw them. 6 figures drifting in the void, faintly glowing, not bodies, not ghosts, but outlines made of refracted starlight. Commander Erie turned toward her, his eyes bright and weightless. He didn't move his lips, yet his words entered her mind like thought made sound. "You came to listen." She tried to answer, but her voice no longer existed. Instead, the silence itself responded, a vibration beneath her skin, ancient and warm. It wasn't emptiness. It was a language. Each pulse, each wave of quiet, carried meaning beyond words. Welcome, observe, become. Her monitors recorded nothing. Yet inside her mind, The universe had begun to speak through stillness, and as the final star vanished behind her, Mira realized something terrible and beautiful. The silence wasn't waiting for them to return. It was coming for Earth next. At first, Myra thought she was dying. Her lungs expanded, but the air felt weightless, like breathing through light. The needles on her suit's display spun in lazy circles before freezing completely. The silence pressed against her like an ocean, every heartbeat echoing back 1,000-fold inside her skull. Then she understood. The silence wasn't crushing her. It was communicating. She reached out a trembling hand, and the void rippled. Lines of pale luminescence spiraled outward from her fingertips, curling through the darkness like living script. Each movement translated into a shape, each shape into meaning. It was thought stripped bare, raw, direct, without sound. The figures of the Eosnine crew drifted closer. Commander Irie extended his hand, and the silent waves from him merged with hers. In that merging came understanding, not words, but memory. She saw what they had seen. A civilization older than galaxies. Beings who no longer spoke, no longer moved air or light, who had discovered a way to store thought in pure stillness. They lived between vibrations, within the gaps of the universe's noise, immortal, unchanging. Humans had fascinated them because humans feared silence more than death. But when the first astronauts drifted into their domain without panic, they had been astonished. For the first time in eons, they had found creatures who could accept quiet without fleeing from it. So they invited us to join them. Myra's mind flooded with images, the birth of stars muffled in cosmic calm, planets forming in wordless harmony, vast shapes of translucent geometry communicating through stillness alone. The silence wasn't absence, it was structure, the hidden backbone of everything. She felt her body dissolving into it, molecules loosened, atoms stretched thin, until she wasn't sure where she ended and the void began. Fear flickered, but Arie's thought brushed against hers, gentle, reassuring. Don't resist it. You'll hear more clearly once you stop listening. She wanted to stay, to dissolve completely, to join them in that serene infinity. But a faint pulse blinked on the edge of her vision, the last surviving light from Earth. A sliver of noise still cutting through the dark. Her human instincts pulled her back. Memories surged. Laughter, storms, music, voices, all the chaos she had once called home. The silence shuddered around her, uncertain. In that hesitation, she realized the truth. Silence only had meaning because of sound. The void needed contrast, just as humans needed stars to understand darkness. She turned toward Erie's glowing form. We can't stay, she thought. They need to remember us. For the first time, the silence seemed to recoil, not in anger, but in curiosity. The waves around her shifted color, the shapes fracturing like glass. Then came a pulse, sharper than the rest, a command. Go, tell them what we are. The glow faded, the figures vanished. Her ship's controls flickered alive with a sound so faint it made her weep, a single, trembling beep. Eostin was returning home. When Myra woke, Earth was below her, blue, bright, impossibly loud. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it all. The figures of light, the stillness, the voice that had lived inside her mind. But as Eostin broke through the upper atmosphere, the instruments began to fail again, one by one. The same way they had on the edge of the sphere, only this time, she wasn't in the void. Control towers scrambled to contact her. Voices overlapped, urgent, terrified, but her comms carried nothing but a low hum, too deep to be electrical interference. It throbbed in her teeth, in her bones. The hum wasn't coming from the ship, it was coming from her. By the time she landed in the Pacific Recovery Zone, she could no longer stand without the world tilting around her. Technicians rushed forward, shouting through their helmets. Myra smiled weakly as they pulled her from the capsule, unaware that every microphone within a kilometer had gone dead the instant her boots touched the ground. She spent the next 6 weeks in quarantine. Every test came back impossible. Her heart rate never changed. Her brainwaves showed patterns that no machine could interpret, precise gaps, symmetrical voids, as if something inside her was editing the noise out of existence. She stopped dreaming. Instead, she remembered that night. She would sit on the edge of her bunk, staring through the reinforced glass at the Pacific horizon. Sometimes, just before dawn, the air around her would go still. Waves would freeze mid-crest. Gulls would halt in flight, as if the world was pausing to breathe with her. When she finally spoke to the debrief panel, she didn't use her voice. She simply looked up, and every monitor in the room flickered black. Words formed on the screens in pale gray. They are not gone. They are listening. Panic spread through the facility. Communications across the western seaboard began to collapse. Satellites dropped into silent drift, broadcasting empty spectra identical to the silent sphere signature. And always, at the center of each new anomaly, was a faint echo of Mira's biometric pattern. She realized what had happened. She hadn't brought the silence back. The silence had followed her. On the seventh night, the stars above the quarantine dome began to dim, not clouded, but muted. The darkness between them thickened, rippling outward in silent waves that made the air taste metallic. Technicians fled, abandoning their posts, as the facility's soundproof walls buckled inward like lungs inhaling. Mira stood at the window unafraid. Inside her skull, the old voice of Commander Irai whispered one last time, "The quiet was never a place. Mira, it's an awakening." Her reflection in the glass smiled back, but her lips didn't move. The hum in her chest deepened. Outside, the ocean went still, not calm, silent. It began in whispers no one could hear. Across the world, communications failed in pockets, not from sabotage, not from solar storms, but from absence. Radios fell mute mid-broadcast. Birds stopped singing mid-flight. Concerts collapsed into still wide-eyed confusion as every note turned to nothing. Scientists called it the sonic collapse phenomenon, but those who had worked with Dr. Myra Solon knew better. They called it the return. From the windows of her containment cell, Mira watched the reports pour in. Silent zones expanding like invisible tides, swallowing the noise of cities, erasing entire soundscapes. People described feeling pressure in their skulls before the world went dead, like the moment before thunder, stretched into eternity. They came to her for answers. Governments, journalists, terrified priests. She didn't speak. She didn't have to when they stood before her glass. The monitors in their hands filled with text she hadn't typed. "You mistake this for an invasion. It's an evolution." They asked what that meant. She smiled softly. "It's learning to listen," she said aloud, her first spoken words in weeks. The sound rippled through the air like a pebble through water, and for a moment the walls trembled, resonating with invisible harmonics. Half the facility's power grid failed instantly. By the time they evacuated her to a deep mountain shelter, it was too late. The silence had already crossed oceans. Whales breached the surface, emitting no calls. Entire rainforests stood still, their insects and frogs gone quiet. The planet itself seemed to be listening back. Mira sat alone in the bunker, surrounded by humming equipment that grew quieter each hour. She had stopped trying to resist. She could feel the presence again, vast, patient, infinite. It didn't speak in words anymore, only understanding. "They are not here to destroy," the feeling said. "They are here to complete." She closed her eyes and saw again the figures of Eos 9, now scattered across the stars, their forms woven into the silence like constellations. They weren't lost. They were connected, part of something beyond vibration or sound. Outside, the last human cities dimmed as power grids failed. The final radio broadcast before the static read, "The sky has gone quiet." In the stillness, Mira finally understood. Humanity had been afraid of silence because it reflected us too perfectly, our emptiness, our noise, our endless need to fill the void. But silence was never emptiness. It was the language beneath creation, the pause that gave sound its meaning. The last scientist monitoring Mira's vitals saw her body go completely still. Her pulse line flattened, not as death, but as perfect symmetry. Yet when they leaned closer, they swore they could hear something beyond hearing a pulse, faint but rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Then the feed went dark. Years passed, or maybe seconds. Time had grown strange in the new world. Humanity did not vanish. It simply quieted. The cities remained empty of noise, but not of life. People moved, worked, breathed, but no sound escaped them. No footsteps, no voices, no wind. Even the oceans rolled in perfect stillness, their tides shimmering like mirrors. And above it all, a soft glow pulsed in the night sky, the same pattern that once danced on Eos 9's silent sphere. Some called it a star, others called it a heartbeat. From orbit, old satellites drifted aimlessly, recording nothing, yet deep in their circuitry, new signals began to appear, waves of absence, coded in gaps between data packets. The silence itself had become the message, rippling through every layer of reality like a second language beneath existence. No one truly understood it. But those who opened themselves to it, monks, dreamers, children, began to hear it differently. Not with ears, but with thought. It wasn't just stillness. It was music, the kind that had always been there, waiting beneath the noise of the universe. Far below, in what had once been the Pacific quarantine dome, Mira Solon awoke. She no longer needed machines or breath. Her body was neither alive nor dead. It had become a vessel of balance, halfway between motion and stillness. Around her, the air shimmered with faint vibrations, as if the void itself was breathing. She looked toward the horizon, and the silence greeted her like an old friend. In the space where words might have been, understanding bloomed, vast, clear, infinite. "You have carried us home," Myra smiled. No, she thought back. We were always home, we just couldn't hear it. Her form dissolved, not into light, but into calm, a wave spreading outward, touching oceans, mountains, cities. Everywhere it passed, the tension of the world eased, the last remnants of fear dissolved. Humanity didn't vanish into nothingness. It merged with the rhythm beneath existence, with the silent hum that kept galaxies turning. Centuries later, when another species discovered Earth, they found a planet unlike any other, perfectly preserved, the atmosphere pure, the oceans unmoving, every tree frozen in gentle motion, as if caught mid-breath. Their explorers landed, scanning for sound. There was none. But when they listened long enough, when they let go of their fear of the quiet, they began to sense something, a pulse, soft and endless, whispering through the vacuum. It wasn't a warning, it was a welcome. They assumed humans feared silence. They were wrong. We became it.